In 1956, a young man in Buenos Aires began dating a girl named Sylvia. He did not know her father had survived Dachau. He boasted about his father's role in the Nazi regime. 4 years later, Israeli agents pulled his father off a bus stop in San Fernando. The young man was Klaus Eichmann. His father was hanged in 1962. Klaus lived another 53 years. Adolf Eichmann had 4 sons. Klaus was born in Berlin in March 1936. Horst Adolf followed in Vienna in 1940. Dieter Helmut was born in Prague in 1942, 3 years before the war ended. By 1945, their father was one of the most wanted men in Europe. He escaped American custody, lived under a false name as a forester for 5 years, and in June 1950 sailed from Genoa to Buenos Aires using Red Cross papers obtained through Bishop Alois Hudal's network. In 1952, Vera Liebel and the 3 boys followed him under their real surname. In Argentina, Adolf and Vera took false names. Their sons did not. Adolf became Ricardo Clement and worked at a Mercedes-Benz plant. Vera registered as Catalina Clement. The boys, however, kept the name Eichmann at school and on the street. In 1955, a 4th son was born in Buenos Aires and given the Spanish-language name Ricardo Francisco. The decision to keep the family name would prove to be the most significant security failure of the entire fugitive operation. In 1956, Klaus, then about 20, began dating Sylvia Hermann, the daughter of Lothar Hermann, a half-Jewish German lawyer who had survived Dachau and emigrated to Argentina. Klaus did not know Sylvia's background. He spoke openly about his father's work for the Nazi regime and about the war, with comments that left Lothar Hermann certain his daughter was dating the son of a wanted war criminal. In 1957, Hermann sent a letter to Fritz Bauer, Attorney General of the West German state of Hesse, and himself a Jewish survivor. Bauer did not trust the German police or embassy in Buenos Aires. On September 19, 1957, he passed the information directly to Israeli officials. Mossad investigated for more than 2 years. Sylvia was sent back to the Eichmann house on a fact-finding mission and was met at the door by Adolf himself, who claimed to be Klaus's uncle. Klaus arrived shortly after and addressed him as father. That confirmation, combined with later work by German geologist Gerhard Klammer, gave Israeli agents the proof they needed. On May 11, 1960, Mossad operatives stopped Adolf Eichmann near a bus stop on Garibaldi Street in San Fernando. He was flown to Israel 9 days later disguised as an El Al crew member. His trial in Jerusalem ran from April to December 1961. Just after midnight on June 1, 1962, he was hanged at Ramla prison. His 4 sons received the news in 2 countries. What each of them did next would take them in directions no observer could have predicted. While their father stood trial in Jerusalem, the eldest son went on the offensive. Klaus Eichmann was 25 and unmistakably proud of the surname he refused to disguise. In 1961, with his father in an Israeli prison and the world watching, he traveled to the United States and gave an interview to Parade magazine. The piece quoted him at length defending his father, calling the charges propaganda, and suggesting that prominent Jewish figures had themselves engineered the wartime deaths. American authorities, alerted by the press coverage and tracked in CIA documents released later, moved quickly. He was deported back to Argentina. The interview was not an isolated outburst. Klaus had reportedly organized a press conference in Buenos Aires within hours of his father's death sentence in December 1961, protesting what he called the injustice of the verdict. After his father was hanged the following June, Klaus returned briefly to public attention as the angriest of the 4 sons, in a country where the family name still drew attention. What followed was unusual. In 1964, the Austrian Jewish philosopher Günther Anders published a short book addressed directly to Klaus by name. We, Sons of Eichmann, open letter to Klaus Eichmann, argued that the Eichmann problem was not a closed chapter of history but a continuing condition of modern industrial life, and that all post-war generations risked becoming sons of Eichmann unless they confronted that inheritance directly. Anders returned with a second letter to Klaus in 1988. Klaus, the addressee, never publicly responded to either letter. By the mid-1960s, Klaus had left Argentina for West Germany. He abandoned his first wife and 2 children he had with her, settled into a new relationship, and went on to father 3 more children. He spent the rest of his life in Germany, far from the country where his father had been hidden. He never publicly renounced his views. According to his sister-in-law's testimony to the Daily Mail in 2018, he supported his father's ideology to the end. Klaus Eichmann died in Germany in 2015 at the age of 79, following a long battle with Alzheimer's disease. He had outlived his father by 53 years. The book addressed to him was still on bookshelf shops. The most committed of the four sons, however, was not Klaus, that was Horst. Horst Adolf Eichmann was 22 when his father was hanged. He had been born in Vienna in 1940, named in part for the dictator his father served, and he absorbed the family ideology more completely than any of his brothers. According to Carmen Breton Lindemann, his longtime partner from the 1970s onwards, Horst genuinely believed his father had done nothing wrong and treated the Holocaust as an invention. The cover story their father had given them, that Hitler had targeted Jews because of a plot to sterilize Germans, Horst took as fact. To believe otherwise, Lindemann said in 2018, would have collapsed his world. The atmosphere Horst stepped into after his father's June 1962 execution was already incendiary. The Tacuara nationalist movement, an Argentine far-right group, launched approximately 30 anti-Semitic attacks across the country that summer. On June 21, 1962, Tacuara operatives kidnapped a 19-year-old Jewish student named Graciela Sirota and tortured her for hours, branding her with a swastika before releasing her. The case drew international outrage and forced the Argentine government to begin a crackdown the following year. Horst and Klaus did not limit themselves to interviews. According to Carmen Breton Lindemann's later account, corroborated in parts by police records, the brothers formed a small Nazi cell in Argentina with plans to attack Jewish businesses and synagogues. Their targets allegedly included a Jewish school bus. The cell did not get that far. In 1962, Argentine police raided their headquarters after what was described as a shootout, recovering Nazi propaganda, firearms, and Molotov cocktails. Horst was later jailed for possession of weapons and extremist material. His public profile did not improve with time. In 1964, he appeared at a press conference in Buenos Aires wearing a Nazi armband with a swastika. In August 1965, Argentine federal police arrested him as part of a sweep of approximately 400 right-wing and left-wing extremists. Interior Minister Juan Palermo announced that Horst had been released for lack of substantial evidence. The decades that followed were quieter, if not by his choice. Horst worked a series of jobs, construction, eventually furniture removal, and lived a private life in Buenos Aires. He had married a woman named Elvira Puma and never legally divorced her because of her Catholic faith, but he left her for Carmen Breton Lindemann in the 1970s. The two remained together for the rest of his life. Horst Eichmann died in Buenos Aires in December 2015 from bowel cancer at the age of 75. He outlived his older brother by only a matter of months. Dieter Helmut Eichmann took the quietest path of any of his brothers. Born in Prague in 1942, he was 18 when his father was captured and 20 when the execution took place. Unlike Klaus, he gave no interviews. Unlike Horst, he kept his distance from politics and police records. He built a career as a construction foreman, eventually managing rental properties, and for years divided his time between Argentina and Germany. He married an Italian woman named Marta Valinotti and had 2 children. According to Carmen Breton Lindemann, Dieter privately believed his father was innocent. He simply never said so in public. Photographed in Buenos Aires in 2018 by the Daily Mail at the age of 76, he was living in an apartment a short drive from the spot where his father had been taken by Mossad 58 years earlier. He declined to comment. The fourth son was different in almost every way. Ricardo Francisco Eichmann was born in Buenos Aires on November 2, 1955. He was 5 years old when Israeli agents took his father from the bus stop on Garibaldi Street, and he later said his clearest memories of his father were of being walked to that bus stop by the hand and being bought chocolate at a sweet shop. After his father's execution, Ricardo's mother kept newspaper cuttings about the trial hidden under a sofa. He read them in pieces as a child, never receiving a full explanation until far later. The family moved back to Germany. As a teenager, Ricardo studied his father's history through books rather than family conversation. He enrolled at Heidelberg University in 1977 and completed a doctorate in prehistory, classical archaeology, and Egyptology in 1984. He chose ancient history deliberately, as far afield from the 20th century as he could find. From 1996 to 2020, he served as director of the Orient Department of the German Archaeological Institute in Berlin, leading excavations in Saudi Arabia, Jordan, and Qatar. In 1995, he met Zvi Aharoni, the Mossad agent who had identified his father in Buenos Aires. Ricardo later called the encounter emotional and said he held no resentment. He has stated that his father deserved to be brought to justice and that the following orders defense excused nothing. When asked once whether he had considered changing his surname, he replied that there would have been no point, that nobody escapes their own past. 4 sons, 2 who defended their father to the end, 1 who lived quietly with the same belief in private, and 1 who built an entirely different life around the rejection of everything his father stood for. The name they all carried meant something different to each of them, a banner, a burden, a private inheritance, or a question that never went away. The decisions his sons made about him played out across the next 60 years. Thanks for watching. If you found this video insightful, watch What Happened to Albert Speer's Wife and Children After World War II next. Like this video, subscribe, and hit the bell for more history inside. And we'll see you in the next one.